The English Channel glittered like shattered glass under the July sun, its surface betraying no hint of the storm gathering beyond the horizon. It was the year 1940. From the cockpit of his Hawker Hurricane, Tom Harrow squinted against the glare, his pulse hammering as the coastline of Dover slid beneath him. The white cliffs stood defiant, their chalk faces scarred by years of wind and now braced for war. At 22, Tom was a fledgling pilot in No. 11 Group, his flight suit still stiff, his hands clammy on the stick. This wasn't a training run. His radio crackled, and a voice, calm, precise, edged with steel, cut through the engine's drone. Blue Squadron, this is Control. Bandits inbound, bearing 180, Angels 10. Scramble to intercept, over. Tom's stomach lurched. Bandits. Luftwaffe. He'd heard the stories. German planes swarming like locusts over Poland, Norway, France. Now they were here, testing Britain's edge. His squadron leader, Flight Lieutenant Davies, barked a reply, and Tom banked left, falling into formation. 6 Hurricanes climbed, their Merlin engines roaring, the sea blurring below. Ahead, a smudge of smoke rose from the channel, where merchant ships plowed through choppy waves, their decks bristling with anti-aircraft guns. Tom's eyes darted to the sky, searching for the enemy. In a dim bunker at Uxbridge, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park stood over a plotting table, his face etched with focus. The operations room hummed with urgency. WAF plotters slid markers across the map, their headsets buzzing with radar reports. Chain home stations along the coast had picked up the raid. A pack of junkers drew 87 Stukas, dive bombers known for their Banshee whales, escorted by sleek Messerschmitt Bf 109s. Park's gaze flicked to the board. The convoy off Folkestone was vulnerable, its cargo vital to Britain's war machine. He leaned into the microphone, his New Zealand accent clipped. No. 11 Group, vector to convoy CW8. Hit the bombers, avoid the fighters. Keep it sharp, lads. Park's strategy was surgical. The RAF had too few planes. Barely 700 fighters against Germany's thousands. Every sortie counted. Radar gave them an edge, spotting raids early, but it demanded precision. Engage the Stukas, disrupt their dives, then slip away before the 109s could pounce. Waste nothing. Park's eyes lingered on the plot, a bead of sweat tracing his temple. This was no mere raid. It was a probe, the Luftwaffe feeling for cracks in Britain's shield. Across the channel, in a chateau near Calais, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring lounged in a velvet chair, a glass of cognac in hand. The room reeked of cigar smoke and arrogance. Maps sprawled across a mahogany table, marked with arrows slicing toward England. Göring's Luftwaffe commanders, hard-eyed men like Albert Kesselring, stood at attention, their reports crisp. Today's raid was simple. Bait the RAF into the open. Bomb the convoys, draw out the fighters, whittle them down. Göring's lips curled into a smile, his metals glinting. "They'll come, gentlemen," he said, voice thick with certainty. "And when they do, we'll carve them from the sky. Britain will kneel before autumn." Kesselring nodded, though his jaw tightened. The RAF wasn't the rabble Göring imagined. Radar, fighters, resolve. They'd held firm so far. But orders were orders. The Stukas would strike, the 109s would guard, and the game would begin. Tom saw the enemy first. A cluster of specks materialized against the haze, 30 miles out, their shapes sharpening into menace. Stukas. Angular, predatory, their fixed undercarriages like talons, flew in tight formation, 20 strong. Above them, Bf 109s glinted, their yellow noses flashing like warning signals. Tom's mouth went dry. The convoy lay dead ahead, a half-dozen freighters steaming in a ragged line, their guns spitting futile bursts skyward. Smoke trailed from one ship, its deck aflame. "Blue Squadron, tally-ho," Davies shouted. "Dive on the bombers, break 'em up." Tom pushed the throttle, his Hurricane shuddering as it plunged. The air screamed past his canopy, the altimeter spinning. The Stukas began their dives, wings slicing the sky, sirens howling. A sound that turned his blood cold. Bombs fell, erupting in geysers around the ships, one freighter lurching as its bow splintered. Tom lined up on a Stuka, its rear gunner swiveling to meet him. Tracers streaked past, bright and lethal, stitching the air inches from his wing. "Steady," Tom muttered, thumb hovering over the firing button. His gun sight framed the Stuka's tail. 8 Brownings roared, the Hurricane bucking as rounds tore into the bomber. Metal shredded, flames licking its fuselage. The Stuka spiraled, trailing black smoke, and crashed into the sea, a white plume marking its grave. Tom's heart leapt. His first kill. But the sky turned feral. A Bf-109 dove from above, its cannons flashing. Tom yanked the stick, rolling hard, the world spinning. See sky smoke. The Messerschmitt overshot, its engine snarling, but another loomed, guns blazing. Tom's canopy cracked, a spiderweb blooming across the glass. He cursed, diving for the deck, skimming the waves to shake the hunter. Above, his squadron clashed in a whirlwind of contrails, hurricanes and 109s twisting like hawks. Davy's voice crackled, strained. Blue 2, break left. Break left. Tom glanced back. Davy's plane trailed fire, a 109 on its tail. He pulled up, chasing the German, but the Stukas were scattering, their escorts regrouping. The convoy burned, 2 ships listing, lifeboats bobbing in the swell. The raid was breaking off, the Luftwaffe retreating into the haze. Tom's fuel gauge flickered. Low. He banked toward land, chest tight, the fight's chaos replaying in his mind. At Biggin Hill Airfield, the squadron landed on a runway pocked with fresh repairs. Mechanics swarmed, shouting over the clatter of tools, refueling planes under a sky still threatening more. Tom climbed from his cockpit, legs unsteady, the salt tang of sweat mixing with oil and cordite. The field was a hive. Pilots debriefing, ground crews hauling ammo, a Spitfire squadron scrambling to relieve them. He spotted Davies, face grim, reporting 1 man lost. Peters, barely 19. In Uxbridge, Park studied the after-action reports, his jaw set. The convoy took a beating, but the RAF held its own. 3 Stukas down, 2 109s for 1 Hurricane. A draw, but draws wouldn't win this war. He lit a cigarette, the flame casting shadows on the plot board. Radar had worked, the lads had fought smart, but the Luftwaffe's numbers loomed like a thunderhead. This was no skirmish. It was the opening move in a battle that could break Britain. Tom slumped in the mess hall, a tin mug of tea cooling in his hands. The radio murmured. Winston Churchill's voice gravelly, promising defiance. Outside, Dover's cliffs glowed in the dusk, unyielding against the sea. Tom's eyes drifted to his Hurricane, patched and ready for tomorrow. The sky was quiet now, but he felt its weight, the promise of more to come. Across the channel, Goring raised a glass to his pilots, certain of victory. Tom didn't know it yet, but he'd just flown into the crucible of history. The August sun baked the tarmac at Biggin Hill, turning the airfield into a shimmering mirage of heat and haste. Hangars stood like battered sentinels, their corrugated roofs dented from shrapnel. Beyond the perimeter, Kent's fields rolled green and indifferent, dotted with haystacks and church spires, but the sky above churned with menace. Tom Harrow leaned against his Hurricane, its metal skin warm under his palm, and scanned the horizon. His flight suit clung damp to his back, the weight of 3 sorties in 2 days pressing on his shoulders. At Biggin Hill, sleep was a rumor, and the Luftwaffe was a promise kept too often. The siren wailed, a jagged cry that sent mechanics sprinting and pilots scrambling. Tom's boots pounded the ground as he vaulted into his cockpit, the familiar reek of oil and leather greeting him. His squadron, Blue Squadron, number 11 group, was down to 9 planes, Peters' loss still raw. The radio crackled, Flight Lieutenant Davies' voice taut. Blue Squadron, scramble. Bandits inbound, Angels 12, sector southeast. Protect the field. Tom's Merlin engine roared, the Hurricane lurching forward, wheels rattling over patched tarmac. Biggin Hill was a lifeline, one of Fighter Command's sector stations, its control tower directing half of southeast England's defenses. Lose it, and the RAF would stagger. As Tom climbed, the airfield shrank below, a patchwork of craters and defiance, ground crews already ducking for cover. The date was August 18, 1940, a day history would call the hardest, though Tom knew only the sweat in his eyes and the dread in his gut. In Uxbridge's operations room, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park stood rigid, his gaze locked on the plotting table. Markers swarmed the map. Red for enemy raids, blue for RAF squadrons. Painting a storm over Kent. Radar had screamed warnings. Hundreds of Luftwaffe planes, Heinkel He-111s and Dornier Du-17s, escorted by a screen of Messerschmitt Bf-109s, converging on Biggin Hill, Kenley, and beyond. Adlerangriff. Eagle attack was Germany's bid to crush Fighter Command, airfield by airfield. Park's voice cut through the bunker's din, steady as steel. Number 11 group, vector to Biggin. Hit the bombers before they drop. Ignore the fighters unless they force you. Move. Park's strategy was a tightrope. Radar gave him eyes. Chain home stations tracking raids from 50 miles out. But his fighters were stretched thin, barely 600 Hurricanes and Spitfires against the Luftwaffe's thousands. Biggin Hill had to hold. Its runways and ops room the RAF's pulse. Park shuffled squadrons like cards, calling reinforcements from No. 12 Group, praying they'd arrive before bombs fell. His fingers tapped the table, betraying the strain beneath his calm. The Luftwaffe wanted a knockout. He'd give them a slugging match. Across the channel, in a command post near Calais, General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring studied raid plans under a harsh lamp. His Luftwaffe too had honed this strike. Massed bombers to pulverize airfields, fighters to fend off the RAF. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring hovered nearby, his mood sour after July's stalemate. Kesselring's jaw clenched as Göring ranted about British weakness, ignoring the RAF's stubborn grit. Today's orders were precise: hammer Biggin Hill, Kenley, Hornchurch. Shatter their runways, burn their planes, blind their command. Kesselring nodded to his aide. Launch everything, he said, voice low. Break their spine today. The sky over Kent erupted as Tom's squadron met the enemy. A wave of Heinkels. Dark, lumbering shapes filled the horizon, their glass noses glinting like predators' eyes. Above, Bf 109s prowled, wings slicing clouds, ready to dive. Tom's altimeter read 10,000 feet, the air biting through his oxygen mask. Davies' orders snapped through the radio. Blue Squadron, dive on the Heinkels. Break 'em up now. Tom pushed the stick, his Hurricane plunging, the world tilting into a blur of sky and steel. The Heinkels flew tight, their gunners swiveling, muzzles flashing. Tracers arced past, bright threads weaving a deadly net. Tom lined up on a bomber, its wingspan filling his gun sight. His 8 Brownings thundered, the recoil shuddering through his bones. Rounds ripped into the Heinkels' starboard engine, sparking flame. It banked, trailing smoke, but the formation held, bombs glinting in open bays. Below, Biggin Hill braced. Bombs fell like black rain, craters blooming across runways, hangars collapsing in fireballs. Ground crews dove for slits, shrapnel singing through the air. A Spitfire, caught on the tarmac, exploded, its wreckage cartwheeling into a fuel truck. The control tower shook, its windows rattling, but controllers kept shouting vectors, their voices hoarse over crackling lines. Tom pulled up, heart slamming, as a Bf 109 flashed across his nose, cannons blazing. He rolled hard, wings straining, the Messerschmitt's slipstream buffeting his canopy. Another 109 joined the chase, its rounds punching holes in his tail. Tom dove, skimming treetops, hedges blurring below, until the Germans broke off, climbing for the pack. The sky was chaos. Contrails twisting, planes spiraling, the air thick with smoke and screams. Davies' Hurricane burned, parachuting down, but Tom had no time to watch. Blue 3, cover me. Tom yelled, spotting a Dornier peeling from the raid, its belly heavy with bombs. He chased it, closing fast, the airfield's flames reflected in his canopy. His guns roared again, shredding the Dornier's tail. It lurched, crashing into a field, the explosion shaking the earth. But more bombers came, wave after wave, the Luftwaffe's hammer relentless. At Bentley Priory, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding watched the broader battle unfold, his face carved from stone. Reports flooded in. Kenley hit, Hornchurch burning, radar stations flickering under attack. His fighter command teetered, pilots flying 5 sorties a day, airfields crumbling. Yet Dowding held back reserves, refusing to bleed No. 10 or 12 groups dry. His voice, when he spoke to Park via phone, was quiet but iron. Hold the line, Keith. Repair what you can. They can't keep this pace forever. Park nodded, though Dowding couldn't see it, and turned back to his plotters. Biggin Hill was still fighting, its runway scarred but usable, its tower defiant. He scrambled another squadron, knowing each plane was a gamble against time. Tom landed amidst the wreckage, his Hurricane's tires skidding on gravel-strewn tarmac. Biggin Hill was a pyre. Hangars smoldered, a wrecked Hurricane lay nose down in the grass, its pilot unmoving. Mechanics swarmed Tom's plane, patching bullet holes, their faces blackened by soot. He climbed out, legs trembling, and saw a new face among the chaos. Sarah Wells, a pilot with the Air Transport Auxiliary, delivering a fresh Spitfire. Her smile was brief, her eyes sharp, but she offered Tom a nod before hurrying off. A spark of connection, fleeting in the inferno. The raid's toll sank in. 2 pilots gone. Jenkins and Cole. Their planes shredded midair. Davies, safe by parachute, limped to the ops room, cursing the 109s. Tom's kill count rose. 2 bombers, maybe a third. But the Luftwaffe's losses barely dented their swarm. Ground crews filled craters under floodlights, working through dusk while controllers tallied the day. Dozens of German planes down, but RAF fields battered, pilots stretched to breaking. In Calais, Kesselring reviewed reports, his mood grim. Biggin Hill still stood, its runway patched, its fighters airborne. Goring raged, blaming pilots, weather, fate. Kesselring knew better. The RAF's resilience was no fluke. Radar, command, sheer guts held them together. He adjusted plans, eyeing London as a new target, sensing the airfields alone wouldn't crack Britain. Tom sat in the dispersal hut, a cigarette unlit between his fingers, the airfield quiet save for distant hammers. The sky darkened, stars piercing the haze, but sleep wouldn't come. He thought of Sarah's nod, of Davy's limp, of the Heinkel's flames. Park's voice echoed from a briefing. They'll hit us again tomorrow. Tom looked at his Hurricane, its silhouette stark against the night. Biggin Hill breathed, battered but unbroken. But for how long? The Thames burned red under a September sky, its waters mirroring flames that devoured London's docks. From the air, the city was a mosaic of smoke and defiance. Warehouses blazed in the East End, St. Paul's Cathedral stood resolute amid the haze, and air raid sirens wailed like mourners. Tom Harrow banked his Hurricane over the Capitol, the acrid sting of ash filling his cockpit. His eyes, shadowed by weeks of combat, scanned the horizon. Number 11 Group had fought to exhaustion, but the Luftwaffe's new target wasn't airfields. It was London itself. On September 7, 1940, the Blitz had begun, and the sky promised hell. Biggin Hill, though scarred, thrummed with purpose. Runways, patched by relentless ground crews, gleamed in the dawn. Hangars stood half-rebuilt, their steel frames jutting like bones. Tom's squadron, battered but bolstered by fresh pilots, prepped for another scramble. The mess hall buzzed with grim humor, but Tom's thoughts drifted to Sarah Wells, the ATA pilot he'd met weeks ago. Word was her Spitfire had been hit delivering to Hornchurch. No news since. He pushed the thought down, strapping into his Hurricane as the siren howled. Blue Squadron, scramble. Flight Lieutenant Davies' voice crackled, sharper now since his August bailout. Bandits inbound, Angels 15, heading for London. Protect the docks. Tom's Merlin engine roared, lifting him into a sky bruised with clouds. Below, London sprawled, its streets clogged with fire trucks and wardens, shelters packed with families clutching gas masks. The Luftwaffe's shift had given airfields a reprieve, but the cost was civilian blood. Tom's altimeter climbed, the city shrinking to a smoldering map. His radio buzzed with Park's orders, calm but urgent. Target the bombers, lads. Break their formations. Reinforcements en route. In Uxbridge's operations room, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park stood like a conductor before a storm. The plotting table swarmed with markers. 500 Luftwaffe planes, Heinkel He-111s and Dornier Du-17s, escorted by a swarm of Bf-109s, converging on London. Radar screens glowed, chain-home stations tracking the raid's Arc Park strategy adapted to the new threat. Use the airfield respite to throw larger squadrons at the bombers, disrupt their runs before bombs fell. He'd grudgingly adopted ideas from Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory of No. 12 Group, big formations, big wings, to hit hard, though their slow assembly grated him. Park's eyes flicked to the clock. September 15, 1940. This raid felt different. Heavier, final. Get every squadron up, Park said, voice low. This is their push. Break it. At Bentley Priory, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding watched the battle unfold, his office a quiet contrast to Uxbridge's chaos. Reports painted a grim picture. London ablaze, civilian deaths mounting, pilots flying on fumes. Yet the Luftwaffe's pivot to cities was a misstep. Airfields were healing, reserves growing. Dowding's restraint had preserved fighter command through August's crucible. Now he sensed a turning point. He lifted the phone to Park. Hold nothing back today, Keith, Dowding said, his tone steady. Show them we're still here. Across the channel, in a Berlin war room, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring paced, his medals jangling. Maps showed London burning, but RAF fighters still rose, defiant as ever. The RAF's raid on Berlin days earlier. Pinpricks yet galling had enraged Hitler, who demanded London's ruin. Göring, stung by August's failures, saw today's massed raid as redemption. General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring, directing Luftwaffe II, urged caution. Airfields remained the true target, but Göring overruled him, eyes wild. Crush their spirit. Göring bellowed. Bomb them until they beg. The sky over London became a furnace as Tom's squadron met the enemy. A tide of Heinkels darkened the horizon, their drone shaking the air, flanked by Dorniers and a cloud of Bf-109s. The Thames twisted below, its docks a roaring inferno, black smoke coiling skyward. Tom's pulse raced, his hurricane diving into the fray, Davy's orders sharp in his ears. Blue Squadron, hit the Heinkels. Stay tight now. The battle was apocalyptic. Tom targeted a Heinkel, its glass nose glinting, bombs visible in its belly. His Brownings blazed, rounds tearing into its wing, fuel streaming like blood. The bomber lurched, bombs tumbling harmlessly into the river, but another took its place, gunners spraying lead. Tracers crisscrossed the sky, a lattice of death. A Bf-109 Dove, cannons flashing. Tom rolled, wings straining, shrapnel pinging his fuselage. His canopy streaked with soot, London's firelight flickering across it. Below, the city fought back. Anti-aircraft guns thundered, shells bursting in black puffs, shredding clouds. Fire brigades battled infernos, hoses arcing through rubble-strewn streets. Civilians huddled in tube stations, singing to drown the bomb's roar. St. Paul's loomed through the haze, its dome a beacon, untouched by flames. Tom glimpsed it, a surge of resolve steadying his hands. Blue 2, break right. Davies shouted. Tom yanked the stick, dodging a 109's gunfire, its yellow nose flashing past. His squadron scattered, reforming to chase bombers, but the Luftwaffe pressed on, their formations tight, aiming for the docks. The radio crackled. Park's voice, directing fresh squadrons from Kenley, Hornchurch, Nordholt. Then a new call, Lee Mallory's Big Wing. A mass of Spitfires and Hurricanes from No. 12 Group, thundering in late but fierce. Tom saw them first. A swarm of fighters cresting the clouds, wings glinting like a cavalry charge. The big wing slammed into the bombers, cannons roaring, Dorniers and Heinkels spiraling in flames. Tom joined the surge, chasing a Heinkel low over the Thames, its shadow rippling across burning wharves. His guns shredded its tail. It crashed into a warehouse, the explosion rocking the city. The sky churned, contrails weaving victory's pattern, the Luftwaffe's ranks thinning under the RAF's hammer. But the cost was brutal. Tom's wingman, Harris, vanished in a fireball, a 109's prey. Davies' Hurricane limped, wing holed, yet fought on. The radio screamed losses. Squadrons mauled, pilots bailing over Kent. Tom's fuel ran low, his gauge twitching, but he stayed, downing a straggling Dornier before breaking for Biggin Hill. The Luftwaffe retreated, their bombers ragged, 109s fleeing east. At Uxbridge, Park exhaled, the plot board clearing. 60 German planes down, maybe more for 30 RAF losses. A blow the Luftwaffe couldn't sustain. September 15th had cracked their myth of invincibility. He glanced at a visitor in the bunker. Winston Churchill, his bulldog face grim but proud, cigar smoldering. Churchill had watched the battle unfold, his question to Park earlier. What reserves do we have? Met with Park's blunt reply. None, sir. Now Churchill nodded. Well done, Park, he rumbled. They'll think twice now. Tom landed at Biggin Hill, the runway a patchwork of fresh cement. Smoke hung heavy, the field littered with debris. Wrecked Hurricanes, a burned-out lorry. Mechanics swarmed, faces gaunt but determined, refueling planes under starlight. Tom climbed out, boots crunching glass, his body aching like he'd fought hand-to-hand. Davies clapped his shoulder, alive but singed, reporting Harris gone, 2 others wounded. The squadron's tally was grim. For pilots lost this week, replacements green as grass. In Berlin, Goring raged, hurling a crystal glass against a wall. Reports confirmed the disaster. Dozens of planes lost, London still standing, the RAF unbowed. Kesselring stood silent, his mind already on night raids, knowing daylight was too costly. Hitler's voice echoed in Goring's ears. Keep bombing. But doubt crept in, a shadow on his bluster. Tom slumped in the dispersal hut, the distant glow of London's fires painting the night. A mechanic mentioned Sarah. Rumors she'd bailed out, maybe alive. Hope flickered, fragile but stubborn. Park's briefing echoed. They hit London to break us. They failed. September 15th had turned the tide, but the war wasn't done. Tom looked skyward, the stars sharp above the smoke. The city breathed, its heart unbroken. He'd fly again tomorrow, for London, for Sarah, for the fight. Mist cloaked the Kent countryside, turning Biggin Hill airfield into a ghost of itself. Autumn's chill seeped through the canvas of the dispersal hut, where Tom Harrow sat, his flight jacket zipped tight. The date was October 30th, 1940, and the sky beyond the runway was a velvet void, pricked by stars and the occasional sweep of searchlights. London lay 30 miles north, its skyline jagged with scars, yet unyielding under nightly raids. The Luftwaffe had changed its game. No more massed daylight swarms, but shadows that struck in darkness, bombing cities to sap Britain's soul. Tom's Hurricane stood ready, but tonight he'd fly a Bristol Beaufighter, its radar a flickering hope against the unseen. The airfield hummed quietly, a stark shift from August's chaos. Runways, smoothed by tireless ground crews, reflected moonlight. Hangars, rebuilt with scavenged steel, housed planes patched like veterans. Tom's squadron was lean. Replacements filled gaps left by Harris, Jenkins, others. But their eyes held less fear now, seasoned by survival. The mess hall radio murmured news. London endured, Coventry braced, the invasion threat faded. Yet Tom's mind lingered on Sarah Wells, the ATA pilot rumored alive, perhaps in a hospital. No confirmation, just a spark he clung to. A klaxon shattered the stillness. Blue Squadron, scramble. Flight Lieutenant Davies called, his limp barely slowing him. Night patrol, bandits over London. Beaufighters up. Tom jogged to the Beaufighter, its twin engines growling, radar operator Sergeant Mills already aboard, fiddling with the glowing scope. The cockpit smelled of metal and sweat, the instrument panel a dim constellation. Tom lifted off, the airfield vanishing into mist, London's distant glow guiding him north. Searchlights danced ahead, their beams slicing clouds, while anti-aircraft guns rumbled, faint flashes marking the capital. The Luftwaffe's night raids, guided by Nicobine radio beams, struck with ghostly precision. Heinkels and Junkers slipping through blackness, their bombs carving wounds no daylight could heal. In Uxbridge, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park reviewed reports in a near-empty ops room, his face gaunt from months of strain. The plotting table, once frantic, tracked fewer raids. Small fighter-bomber strikes by day, elusive bombers by night. Radar still warned of attacks, but catching phantoms was harder. Park's strategy leaned on endurance. Bolster anti-aircraft batteries, deploy early night fighters like Tom's Beaufighter, and keep daytime defenses sharp against hit-and-run Jabo raids. London's survival proved the Luftwaffe's failure. Morale held, factories churned. Park lit a cigarette, its ember bright in the gloom. His time with No. 11 Group neared its end, but he'd held the line. Keep the pressure on, Park told his controllers. They're tiring. We're not. At Bentley Priory, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding sat alone, maps spread before him. The Battle of Britain, though unnamed by most, was waning. September 15th had broken the Luftwaffe's daylight campaign. Night raids, though brutal, signaled retreat. Dowding's restraint, hoarding reserves, rotating pilots, had preserved fighter command. Losses were grim. Over 1,000 planes, countless lives, but the RAF flew stronger now, new pilots trained, airfields secure. He penned a memo to the Air Ministry, his hand steady. Invasion was off, Hitler's gaze turning east. Yet Dowding's heart weighed heavy. Each pilot's name etched in memory. Across the channel, in a Calais command post, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring slumped in a chair, his uniform creased, eyes bloodshot. Wrecked planes littered German airfields, their crews demoralized, fuel dwindling. Reports confirmed September's toll. Hundreds of aircraft lost, London unbowed, the RAF relentless. Göring's boasts of victory curdled. Hitler's orders to bomb persisted, but invasion plans gathered dust. General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring, silent nearby, planned night raids with cold precision, knowing daylight was forfeit. Göring glared at a map, Britain's outline mocking him. They'll crack, he muttered, voice hollow. No one answered. Tom's Beaufighter prowled at 15,000 feet, the Thames a silver thread below, London's fires pulsing like embers. Mill's voice broke the radio's hiss. Contact, bearing 270, range 10 miles. Heinkel, maybe. The radar scope flickered, a blip dancing in static. Tom banked west, eyes straining through the dark, searchlights his only guide. The battle was intimate, a hunter's game. No swarms, just shadows and instinct. Anti-aircraft shells burst nearby, shrapnel clattering against the fuselage, but Tom held course. There! Mills barked. A silhouette darted through a cloud, its twin engines droning. A Heinkel He-111, low and laden. Tom dove, the Beaufighter's nose heavy, cannons primed. The Heinkel jinked, its gunner firing wildly, tracers streaking like fireflies. Tom's crosshairs settled, for cannons roared, flashes lighting the bomber's wing. Fuel ignited, a comet's tail flaring as the Heinkel spiraled, crashing into fields beyond the city, a dull boom echoing. Tom exhaled, sweat beading under his mask, but Mills scanned again. No rest in the long night. Daylight brought a different fight. On October 31st, Tom was back in his Hurricane, scrambled against a Jabo raid. Messerschmitt Bf 110s, fighter bombers darting over Dover. The sky was crisp, clouds scattered, the channel glinting below. The battle was quick, sharp. A pack of 110s bombed coastal guns, their escorts weaving above. Tom chased one low, skimming cliffs, his guns shredding its tail. The Bf 110 crashed near Dover's castle, smoke curling over ancient stone. The raid scattered, RAF losses light, a signal of Germany's fading strength. Biggin Hill welcomed Tom back, its runway smooth, hangars bustling. Ground crews cheered his Beaufighter kill, slapping his back as he climbed down, boots crunching frost. Davies shared news. Luftwaffe raids were thinning, pilots whispering of Berlin's retreat. Tom's thoughts turned to Sarah, hope stubborn as ever. That evening, Park visited, his last before reassignment. His words were brief, voice hoarse. You held London, lads. You held Britain. In Berlin, Göring faced Hitler's silence, the invasion shelved, his Luftwaffe limping. Kesselring planned winter raids, but the tide had turned. At Bentley Priory, Dowding walked the grounds, stars bright above, knowing his pilots had won. Not just battles, but time. Tom stood by his Hurricane, the airfield quiet, mist curling low. London's glow softened, its people enduring. A letter waited in the mess. A hospital note, Sarah's name alive. His chest loosened, a smile breaking through. The sky stretched vast, no longer a threat, but a promise. He'd fly tomorrow, not for fear, but for them all. A November dawn broke over Biggin Hill, painting the airfield in hues of gold and frost. The runway stretched smooth, its craters filled, a testament to months of defiance. Hangars stood proud, their steel patched but sturdy, Hurricanes and Spitfires gleaming like sentinels in the morning light. Beyond the perimeter, Kent's Fields lay quiet, mist curling through hedgerows, the distant chime of church bells a rare hymn of peace. Tom Harrow stood by his Hurricane, his flight jacket unbuttoned, breath clouding in the crisp air. The sky was clear, vast, no longer a battlefield but a canvas of possibility. Biggin Hill bore its scars lightly now. Shrapnel dents pocked the control tower, grass sprouted in old blast marks, and the mess hall buzzed with new voices. Replacements who'd never known August's hell. London, 30 miles north, rebuilt under scaffolding, its docks bustling again, St. Paul's Dome unmarred by the fires that had tried to claim it. The Luftwaffe's night raids persisted, but their sting had dulled. Scattered, desperate, a shadow of September's fury. Word had spread, quiet but certain. Hitler's invasion was off, his eyes turned east. The Battle of Britain, though Tom didn't call it that, was won. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding arrived unannounced, his staff car crunching gravel outside the dispersal hut. His face, lined by sleepless months, softened as he addressed the squadron. Pilots gathered on the tarmac. His voice carried weight, breaking once as he spoke of those lost. Harris, Jenkins, Peters, names etched in memory. You held the line, Dowding said, eyes sweeping the ranks. You gave Britain her future. Tom stood straighter, his chest tight, the words landing like a medal he'd never wear. A letter from Keith Park, now reassigned, had reached the mess hall days earlier. Typed but personal, it praised No. 11 Group's grit, their skies unyielded. You were the shield, Park wrote, and Tom felt the truth in his bones. He'd flown through chaos. Channel skirmishes, airfield infernos, London's blazing nights, and emerged not unbroken, but whole. His kills, his losses, his near misses. They were threads in a tapestry larger than himself. The mess hall held another letter, one Tom had read until the creases frayed. Sarah Wells was alive, recovering in a Surrey hospital, her Spitfire downed, but her parachute true. She'd written 2 lines, her hand shaky. Keep flying, Tom. I'll be back. He smiled now, folding the note into his pocket, the promise of her words a spark against winter's chill. Sarah's survival wasn't victory's sum, but it was enough for today. Tom climbed into his Hurricane for a routine patrol, the cockpit familiar as home. The Merlin engine purred, its power steady under his hands. Mechanics waved, their grins bright, as he taxied past, the airfield alive with purpose. London's skyline faded behind him, its wounds healing, its people unbowed. He climbed to 5,000 feet, the channel shimmering below, Dover's cliffs a white bulwark against the sea. No bandits today, no sirens. Just sky, endless and free. He banked west, sunlight glinting off his wings, and let his thoughts drift. Harris laughing over cards, Davies limp, Parks calm in the storm, moments that had forged him. The RAF stood firm, its pilots ready for whatever came next. Tom didn't look back, didn't need to. Britain breathed, its heart steady, its dawn unbroken. He flew on, for Sarah, for the fallen, for the fight that was theirs.